Hi, this is Scott Garibay, and today I want to talk about the tabletop role-playing game industry, its current state, and specifically the state of the tabletop role-playing game industry from the perspective of the printed book. So let's dive into this. So specifically what I wanted to talk about today is something I learned from something that was said to me, all right, I don't know if it's true or not, that was said to me from an industry insider. The reason why I'm repeating it is it absolutely matches exactly what I've suspected for a long time, and it's something that very well may be coming, okay? And it also might just be deep. So one of the reasons why I'm talking about it is very hard to get news about the tabletop role-playing game industry. I'm incredibly interested in the tabletop role-playing game industry, but it's very hard to get news about the tabletop role-playing game industry. At the industry level, people want to talk about, new products and things like that. Another reason why it's very hard for me to get news about the tabletop role-playing game industry is I do not care about your adventure, right? Like, there's a lot of tabletop role-playing game out there. There's a lot of people writing adventures. There's literally hundreds of adventures for the vast majority of tabletop role-playing games being created by just a scad of small shops. And they all want attention for their little nonsense adventure, right? And it just creates a ton of noise in the tabletop role-playing game sphere as far as news, right? And the reality is, like, if you just kept the news at the level of here's a new tabletop role-playing game, you could hear, right? But there's so much, people are just like literally covering like the release of an adventure is not a newsworthy event, not even remotely. There's just so many of them. They're so needless. Right? Like, nobody needs an adventure. Like, the best dungeon masters and game masters write their own adventures. So but it just puts so much chaff in the air. It's hard to get any real news for tabletop role playing games. But I heard this, and it really perked my ears up, and I was like, oh boy. Because it has ramifications for the industry, and I want to talk about it today. All right, but so first of all, let me kind of set the scene. So I'm very, very fortunate, very blessed. I recently had a birthday. I was very, very fortunate, and I got some birthday money. And in addition to this, we had to tax return, so I got some tax return money. So between those two, and it was pretty sizable, and so I got some money out of that. Like the way my money works is my wife has control of all the money and gives me a little bit of it at the end of the month. It's just the way we structure things because she's better with money than I am, right? And so I had a few $100s, right? I had literally had $500 in my pocket, which is like a very rare occurrence. It almost never happens, right? And but I was like, I'm going out on a crazy spending spree. So I went to a FLGS that I almost never go to. It's not that close to my home, but it was close to an area I was in for one particular period of time. And so I was like, oh yeah, I can stop here. And I only stop in this place about every 2 or 3 years. It's not close to my home, but this shop is amazing. It's really, really incredibly well stocked. And it carries miniature games, tabletop role-playing games, and board games. So it also carries card games, collectible card games. So like Magic the Gathering and Magic the Gathering mostly. So, and it's incredibly well stocked, and it's in a wealthy area, and it's absolutely incredible. Like, he almost always has multiples of the new hotness, and it's a really, really great shop, right? Now, I'm actually not going to name it because this is on the real what he kind of told me. I really think what he told me, I think it's correct, right? But it is speculation, and I'm going to say that right out. This is me speculating about what's happening in the industry because I'm trying to read the tea leaves. And the reason why is I want to know what's going to happen in the future of the tabletop role-playing game. I'm concerned for the future of the tabletop role-playing game, and I want my game to help the hobby, to help the future of the hobby, right? So I'm always trying to figure out what's happening next. So I was paying very close attention to what this shop owner, and so this guy owns his own shop outright, has paid for it a long time ago. He's been in business 15 years, and this is what he had to say. So first of all, here's how we came on this subject, right? So he was delighted to see me because I only stop in the shop about every 2-3 years. But when I do, I drop $100 to $300. And sure enough, last night I dropped $300 in the shop. Right? I bought Scythe, the board game. I bought one tabletop role-playing game product. I bought the L5R Fantasy Flight Games box set, the beginner box set, and an extra pair of dice, right? So actually 2 tabletop role-playing game products. That was about $55 right there, okay? Just those 2 products. I bought Scythe, I bought the L5R box, L5R dice, and then addition to that, I also bought Root. Root just came back in print, which is really fantastic, or a board game. All the rest of these are board games. I bought a card game called Air, Land, and Sea. I bought Arboretum, another card game. I bought Epic Kingdom, which I've wanted to try for a long, long time. I'm very glad to own that and give it a try. I bought Dice Forge, which I was very excited about. And I think that is everything, right? So, I bought quite a few cool, exciting new games. Might have been 1 or 2 more products in there, but I was very excited to get these new games, and it was really wonderful to just be able to roll in, with a big old, literally a fat stack of cash and get whatever I want. It was really, really nice. And it's not just me just like picking stuff off the shelf. I go to PAX every year, and PAX Unplugged, and they have a huge selection of board games, and I rarely buy anything there. It just informs my buying for the rest of the year, which is great, I think that's really good. It works out well. I usually buy 1 or 2 games there, but it really helps my buying for the rest of the year. So me and this FLGS owner, we get into this very nice, comfortable conversation because he's happy as a clam because I just dropped $300 in his shop, right? He's happy to see me again, and we have a great relationship. Why shouldn't we, right? The only time he ever sees me is when I'm dropping $100 to $300, right? So we get along great, right? So, and he knows that TTBRGs are my main jam, right? Well, his shop, if you look at his shop, literally 90% of his shop, I would say actually 80% of his shop is board games. 15% of his shop is I'd say 75% of his shop is board games. 15% of his shop is miniatures, okay? 5% of his shop is Magic the Gathering, and 5% of his shop is tabletop role-playing games, okay? So that's it, and so I went over and I looked in the tabletop role-playing game corner, and here's what was there. Now, this is all physical product, okay? And it was very sad, right? Now, first of all, he has a great shop. It was very well stocked, okay? And Dungeons & Dragons was incredibly well represented, okay? He had all the new 5th edition stuff on the shelf. He had the box sets. He had the corresponding miniatures that you could buy for the game. And Dungeons & Dragons is doing great. Do not get it twisted. Don't get confused. Dungeons & Dragons is doing fantastic in the physical product world, right? Now, that's never changed, right? It's the flagship, right? That is good. And 5th edition is doing good, okay? All right, next is Pathfinder. There was an absolute ton of Pathfinder. But guess what? All that Pathfinder stuff on the wall, it was all 1E, right? Actually, I'm sorry. It wasn't all 1E. It was 90% 1E. And there was rows and rows of it. There was like 3 entire bookshelves of Pathfinder. Pathfinder was incredibly well represented on the shelf in physical product, but it was just 1E Pathfinder with a little bit of 2E, and I get the idea that 2E is not crushing it, right? Like, nobody's like scrambling to get the 2E physical product, and there's still a ton of people buying that old 1E stuff, right? I shouldn't say a ton. I'm just saying in TTPRG world, 1E is still a thing and still going strong, right? In TTBRG numbers, okay? All right, so you got that there, and then you reached the third section, which was Fantasy Flight Games. And the big section there was the Star Wars tabletop role-playing game. Star Wars tabletop role-playing game, lots of hardback books. They're all there, all the product. There was the L5R game that I bought, the box set, as well as the hardback books. And Fantasy Flight Games was well represented with physical product. The last section was just a smattering, right? Maybe a few hardback books for Fate, and just a few indie books. Just a tiny, didn't even finish. The indie section filled half of a single bookshelf, okay? The rest of it was Wizards of the Coast, 5th edition D&D, Pathfinder 1E, right? And Fantasy Flight Games Star Wars. That's pretty much the only thing on the shelf. And we're here because this guy cannot stock tabletop role-playing game physical product because it doesn't sell, okay? And I've been noticing this. If you've been noticing, brick and mortar American tabletop role-playing game shops are disappearing quick. I think there's only 2 left. There's Hasbro Gaming, and there's Monty Cook Games. I don't think there's a single other. Fred Hicks, what's going on with Fate? Do they still have an office? I don't know, right? Because I know they had a rough year the last 2 years. They've been putting out, like, they're not doing great, right? Like they're hanging on by a thread in that, and they've had to scale back books and they're not as happy about like giving their product away for free as they used to be, right? And so all of this comes from and a very large trend that we've talked about previously is at the macro level, especially when it comes to print product and brick and mortar shops. Like, you have a company where people make tabletop role-playing games every single day and make a living at making tabletop role-playing games, right? That's what a real business is. Like, men and women put on their pants in the morning, go and drink your coffee for free and design games, and you pay them a salary and you give them benefits, right? That's a real company. We're not talking about some dude, fulfilling his Kickstarter in his garage. That's not what I'm talking about, right? That's nice, that's cute, love it, looking forward to your game, but that's not a real business, right? So that's my point, is there's only 2 left in the whole country, right? Like Monty Cook Games and Hasbro Gaming. That is a very bad sign, right? Like, that is not good. And by the way, if I'm wrong with any of this, let me know. All right, so here's what that shop owner told me. I was like, what? He said, oh yeah, I started talking with him. I'm like, we got a real problem. Like, this is not good. I told him everything I just told you, right? And he goes, oh yeah, and you don't even know the worst of it. And I was like, what's the worst of it? And he goes, well, I heard that, he says, I'm not expecting Fantasy Flight game products in much longer. I heard that they are fully committed to finishing all the product they have for Star Wars gaming, and that Fantasy Flight Games is looking to massively scale or even sell their entire tabletop role-playing game division, and that they are not happy with how it's been going and have very little interest in even continuing the TTRPG section of their business. And at minimum, for the Star Wars game, right, the plan is that they are going to finish everything that's in the works, everything that's in the pipeline. They're going to finish it, they're going to print in it. But if they had planned to print like 10,000, they're going to print 1,000, right? And so they're going to finish it, they're going to finish their commitment, but then that's it. It's finished, right? Now, right here on the inner tubes, you will find me saying, I think that Star Wars is on a clock. The Star Wars tabletop role-playing game is on a clock. I've always thought it was on a clock. And here's why. If you're paying attention, you understand that licensed games are incredibly rare and incredibly hard to do, okay? And right now, you cannot buy a licensed tabletop role-playing game for any Disney, for any Marvel superhero or any DC superhero. You haven't been able to do it for 10 years, right? Maybe for at least 5 or 10 years. The last one, can't believe this, Margaret Weiss Games had the Marvel license. She was her company was the last company to have the Marvel license. It was probably about 5 years ago. They made this super non-intuitive, hard to understand game, which I actually loved. I thought it was pretty cool. But it failed horribly, and it was gone. And that was it. That was the last official Marvel tabletop role-playing game. And the Marvel tabletop role-playing game had bounced from company to company to company for no less than 15 years, and no less than 5 different companies that owned that license. And it was the same with DC. Official DC tabletop role-playing games had bounced from company to company to company, never finding an actual true home, never finding a settled actual customer base. And now it is impossible to buy an officially licensed superhero tabletop role-playing game for Marvel or DC. And so I would look at at the Star Wars game, and I'm like, how does this even exist? And sure enough, I was right. I think I'm right. It is my opinion, I don't think there will be a single FFG. This is my prediction. I am predicting now there will not be a single printed FFG Star Wars book in 2021. Tabletop role-playing game. Right? We will see. And I think they're spinning it down now, and that you will see less and less in the pipe. Right? And I also think there's a distinct possibility that what that shop owner has said is correct, that FFG will spin down, shutter, or sell their entire tabletop role-playing game industry. I have zero proof of this, except the words of one industry insider, a shop owner who buys this stuff on the reg, right? Saying, yeah, like, this stuff doesn't sell. And the reason why is the business model is absolutely horrible, right? Now, all that's a lot of bad news if you like print books, okay? And again, FFG's, it's their business. They can do what they want. And I really hope they prove me wrong. Like, that they're, like, super, super dedicated to the future of their tabletop role-playing game industry. I would love to be proven wrong on this, right? And actually, I'm not even saying that they're going to do this. I'm saying what I heard, right? And the only reason why I'm even repeating it is it very much matches the trend, right? The trend is that licensed tabletop role-playing games are not successful, okay? And if you think I'm wrong, right, just take a look around. Look at the tabletop role-playing games that, even the recent few, right? Like Alien, right? It's one of the brand new tabletop role-playing games. It went to Free League Publishing, right? Which is an international publisher, not a U.S. publisher, right? That's not a good sign generally. Not a good sign, right? It's a big concern that when it comes to print books, all the energy is on the other side of the ocean and not in the U.S. That's a very, very big concern for me. So I am definitely concerned. I definitely think that we could be on a clock for FFG tabletop role-playing games. If you've heard anything to the exact opposite, please let me know. I'm more than willing to hear, right? And I'm definitely concerned that FFG games are going to be spun down, right? Because the reality is, tabletop role-playing games are a very, very hard sell in today's market. Now, this doesn't mean that let me kind of wrap up here. This doesn't mean that our hobby is dying. What it means it's changing, right? So I really think where we're heading to is a future where the vast majority, where the hobby, the tabletop role-playing game hobby, is really a whole bunch of passion projects by people who are very passionate about making them, but they're not really made by actual companies. They're made by people who are really passionate about it. It's almost like craft beer, right? Like, every town's got, 2 dudes and, or 2 ladies who make their apple pumpkin, brand, and everybody in the town loves it. And I think that's where we're going. We're going to these craft tabletop role-playing games that a small local community will be very excited about, and they will genuinely love. But the reality is the entire industry is moving away from large-scale, multi-million-dollar deals, and it's going to be this. And I think more and more these tabletop role-playing games are going to live on laptops. They're going to be PDFs, right? And so one thing we could do is let's switch the orientation to landscape, because they're going to be on laptops anyway. Why keep pretending that these books have a future in print? So all that's my opinion. I'd love to hear your opinion. Let me know in the comments below. Please consider liking and subscribing, and have a wonderful millennium.